Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and welcome back to the Great Movie Ride podcast. I am your host, Gaston, joined by my co-host, Jerryofdom,
Why?
and today we are not talking about Jurassic Park like we said at the end of the last one. Just for timing, Jurassic Park has been delayed 1 week so that it lines up with the release of the movie better. So what are we talking about this time? Well, we're talking about Rogue One, a Star Wars story. That's right, our first Star Wars review is happening now. Would you like to open with your previewing thoughts? Nick, Jerry, you, person?
Previewing thoughts from a very long time ago. All I remember was, where's the lightsabers? And I was like, what? Because little me was like, well, there should be lightsabers. But it turned out that when I watched that movie, it's fantastic. Don't need lightsabers to make good Star Wars.
Mandalorian. I saw this film on opening night back in December of 2016. I was pumped for it, but I knew going in. So this is a mild spoiler, but I thought for sure that most or all of the characters would have to die for it to stay canon. Um, so I told everyone that I talked to about this film that the tricky thing the movie has to do is make us care about characters we've never seen before and will likely never see again. And I loved the movie. It is a contestant for my favorite Disney Star Wars film, and may even be in my top three Star Wars films, period. So when Nick suggested we review Rogue One, I was pumped to see it again because I hadn't seen it for a couple of years. I'm like, oh,
I
that's gonna
haven't
be
either.
fun.
It's been a while.
So let's just transition straight into the light spoiler sum up. Listen to how precise I've got this one. You ready? This is my best light spoiler plot summary yet. Rogue One tells the story of how the Rebel Alliance learns of the Death Star's existence and how they obtained the plans for the station that Princess Leia has at the start of A New Hope. Boom! That's the movie. That's the play. That was what, 30 seconds?
Great timing.
So let's transition to our characters portion. We have a fair bit here, not as much as in Kanto, but there's a few characters we're going to talk about here today. And of course, we're going to start with Jyn Erso, who is played by Felicity Jones. She is a young renegade woman who is detained for her crimes against the Empire until she is freed by the Rebel Alliance. She is the daughter of Imperial weapons designer Jyn Erso. Would you like to start with your thoughts on Jyn?
Uh, I really like her character. It had an interesting story to it, and how she doesn't particularly care about the alliance issues, but more of her own personal issues. And it brought an interesting dynamic to the movie, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think she's a great protagonist, and her acting is really, really good in this film. It's the emotion she's able to display. She has a lot of emotional beats throughout this story. It's really well done and very entertaining to watch, especially when she deals with tragedies in her life. It's very well done. So next, let's talk about Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna, a rebel captain and intelligence officer who is haunted by some of his past deeds he undertook for the Rebel Alliance. Cassian is a very deep character, in my opinion. Brought to life brilliantly by Diego Luna. The complexity of Cassian might be lost on people if they're not really paying attention to what happens, but he is a very complex character. And we're going to see him again in the upcoming Disney Plus series Andor, and I'm all for it. I
Oh
love
yeah,
to see Cassian
I
again.
because he seems to have this dark past to him that they don't get into because it's a movie that didn't. I don't. They didn't have any plans to do anything with afterwards. I scared, so I don't think. So it's interesting to see that they're gonna go back to Cassian because I think a lot of people really enjoyed that idea of a dark past of a Rebel Alliance person.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause most of the time they're happy go-getters.
So let's transition then to Orson Crick, He's portrayed by Ben Mendelsohn. He's the villain of our story. He's the director of advanced weapons research for the Imperial military. He is credited with the creation of the Death Star. Would you like to start talking about director Krennic?
This is my second favorite character in the movie, and I'm pretty sure you probably guessed my first favorite because it's most people's first favorites. Um, but I enjoy his character because you always see like, oh, the guy built the big weapon, so he's gonna be credited for it. But throughout the whole movie, they're just trying to kick Krennic off that list of credibility and just being like, "You're garbage. We don't care about you." And you really see that injustice of the Empire that runs throughout it because they are that way. They are supposed to be, the
They're the
peace
villains.
and security of the Empire to themselves, but they don't care about their own men either.
Mhm. Yeah, he's a perfectly smarmy villain, and it's something that Ben Mendelsohn plays so well. Be it Dark Knight Rises or Rogue One or Robin Hood or Ready Player One, he plays that so well. And Krennic is quotable character too. We stand here amidst my achievement, not yours. And he's a good foil to the protagonist. He's like the exact opposite of what Jyn represents.
Yeah.
Um, I dislike him, but not in the way that I don't like the character. It's that he's the villain,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that I dislike. It's not that I hate that character. It's like yeah, you're a good villain. You're nasty, and I like that. Like it's good. He's a very good villain. So let's transition to Chirrut Imwe, portrayed by Donnie Yen. He is a blind warrior who believes in the Force and is said to be one of the guardians of the Wills. Chirrut is my second favorite character in this movie. He has some tremendous one-liners and a great personality and incredibly cool action sequences. They really play into the blind nature of the character and the faith in the Force. I would watch a Baze and Chirrut spin-off series in a
Oh,
heartbeat.
100%. I enjoy that idea because the Force is meant to be that extra guidance between you, so they never really dabbled in like movies or stuff of a blind type of character that deals with the Force. It's not like he has Force powers, but he can feel the Force around him a
Hmm,
lot stronger than most people.
he's sensitive
And
to it.
exactly. And I like it because it's taking those skills of like what the Jedi has for wielding their lightsaber, but throwing it into someone that doesn't have the powers of Jedi Force.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that interesting idea that they throw in there. And
Mm-hmm.
making him blind just makes him more interesting.
And Donnie Yen is spectacular.
All 100.
He's great. If you don't know who that is, he's a very famous martial artist in a long history of films. He is incredible. I love some of the lines in there, like, "You nearly shot me. You're welcome." And "Where are you going? I'm following Jyn. Her path is clear. Alone? Good luck. I don't need luck. I have you." And Bates just goes and follows
Fine.
him. So let's talk about Galen Erso, portrayed by Mads Mikkelsen. Jin's father and a research scientist who is instrumental to the Death Star's construction. Would you like to start with Galen?
He plays like that major part, but like isn't an obvious major part of it. Because in reality, he should be the one getting all the credit that director Krennic wants because he's the one that made it.
It just further goes
But
with the Imperial, like, taking the
yeah,
credit from others who do the work.
I would be interested to see how it all started out because when we see at the end of Revenge of the Sith, where they're building Death Star at the very end,
Mhm.
I want to know like had he already joined at that point because they do show that he was part of the Imperial, and I was like,
Mhm.
who knows? And they just he's an interesting character that isn't a main character.
Yeah, he's a focal point in the film, but he is not on the screen very much. Um, he's what sets the whole plot in motion in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Um, and there is such a nice gravitas to the character that the actor brings to him. He's like a quiet, soft-spoken man, but when he speaks, you pay attention. He's fascinating, but
Every role I see him in is a good role.
He's
Where
a good
he
actor.
takes that center of the screen.
Mm-hmm. Captures the attention. His only downfall, Galen's only downfall is he's just not in a lot of the screen
Yeah.
time. But I don't hold that against him because
No.
if we saw more of him, it probably wouldn't have the same impact.
No.
Like I enjoy Galen very much. He's an
Yeah.
interesting character. So now let's talk about K2 Esso, who is portrayed by Alan Tudyk in more ways than one. Tudyk voices and provides the mocap for him. He was wearing the suit with all the fancy little balls on it and everything. He's a former Imperial Enforcer droid who was reprogrammed by Cassian Andor to serve the rebellion, and gosh darn it, Tudyk is hysterical.
This guy is my favorite.
It cements to me why Alan Tudyk is one of my favorite actors. Like, I know he is, but every time I see him in something, especially as brilliant as K2, it's like, that's why you're one of my favorites.
Even my dad was like, really loved the character.
Oh, he's great.
Like, yeah.
It's just, literally, the only term I can come up is incredible. His one-liners. Quiet! And there's a fresh one if you mouth off again. You know, in that scene, Alan Tudyk accidentally slapped Diego Luna. If you look at him, if you look at Diego Luna when he has his hand over his face, he's laughing. You can tell in his eyes he's laughing when he's whack. Now, Star Wars is a universe filled with iconic droids. 3PO, R2, BB-8, K2 is my favorite of all of the droids we've ever seen. I hope he is in Andor. He better be.
A2 was my favorite character in the movie. Like, easily. Every time he was beating up a stormtrooper, did anything towards killing someone, like beating the crap out of him, my dad just loved it just because of the way he does things.
Mm-hmm.
Picks up a stormtrooper, bonk.
It's the
bonk,
other stormtroopers
bonk.
with him, yeah. I love the, on Jeddah, when the stormtrooper throws a grenade, he just reaches out and grabs it and tosses it behind him and blows up a bunch of them. You're right, I should have just stayed on the ship. I love it. Oh, he's so good. He's my favorite as well, in case that wasn't clear. So let's go to Bodhi Rook, who's portrayed by Riz Ahmed. He's a former Imperial cargo pilot who defects to the rebels under the influence of Jyn Erso. Would you like to open with Bodhi?
I feel like they could have done a little better with him. I think he was like my least favorite out of all of them. They make him this important character, but he's really only useful for the first little part of the movie, and then afterwards I feel like he's there just because he knows how to use codes for Empire.
So it's interesting. When I first watched Rogue One, I would have said the same thing. He was probably my least favorite. I didn't much care for him. But when I was watching it this time, because as you and I have talked about, probably not during the podcast, but about the podcast, that you and I have both started watching movies differently since we've started reviewing them. I got to see a real depth to that performance. And maybe it's because I hadn't seen him in anything before when I watched Rogue One, but since then I've seen him in like Venom, where his performance was like Riot was kind of terrible.
Yeah.
But I got to see an actual, like, there is a lot of depth to Bodhi Rook's portrayal. That I quite like him. He's not my favorite, but I wouldn't say he's my least favorite anymore. We haven't talked about my least favorite yet. I think he's likable, and his heroic sacrifice. Because he's literally from the Empire, where heroics, if you survive them, gets you a slap on the wrist for disobeying orders.
Yep.
And to see him rise above that, I actually would have agreed with you, but it was only on this one and I'm like, I kind of like Bodhi. That's a good performance.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Everyone's got their own opinion, right? I'm sure there's some people out there who don't like K2SO. Let's talk about Baze Malvis, who's portrayed by Zhang Wen. He is a longtime companion of Chirrut Imlay and one-time devoted guardian of the Wills. Now a rebel warrior and mercenary who has lost his faith in the Force. Baze is also incredibly cool. His blaster, his look, the friendship with Chirrut, and he also has some great lines. And like Baze and Chirrut, certifiably cool. they're up there with Han and Lando as some of the coolest characters Star Wars, and Mando as some of the coolest characters that Star Wars has ever done. They are awesome. High praise for this. This film really doesn't have a bad character in the main cast. They do it so well.
Like, even the cargo pilot, like, I was giving him crap, but, like, he's still a good character.
Oh yeah, it's just your least favorite of like it's a sea of stars is what we're looking at here.
Yeah. Like, Big Blaster, all the scenes that he's in, he has a presence there. Just like how
With limited dialogue, he does not say much.
But like that, like near the end of the movie, that one scene where he's walking is like such an impactful scene.
More on that later. And finally, let's talk about Saw Gerrera, who is portrayed by Forrest Whitaker. He's a veteran of the Clone Wars and a friend of the Erso family who had mentored Jyn in her later childhood years. I guess it's your turn to go first, so why don't you start with Gerrera?
I think this is interesting because this is the first time, because he'd been in the Star Wars universe beforehand, right?
He's been in it multiple times now.
Yeah. But this is the first time he was in live action. And it was interesting to see how they portrayed him because it was very much near the end of his time when they showed him off. So it brings a more interesting depth when you've watched like the Clone Wars. And is he in Rebels?
Yes, but that was after Rogue One that he appeared in Rebels. Like Rebels is before Rogue One timeline, but released later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was just like they brought Forrest Whitaker back to voice him in Rebels, but it was like leading into Rogue One.
Okay, but it's still interesting to see all that character from the cartoon brought into live action.
He was really the first character to do it. To go from cartoon to live action in Star Wars. I guess Grievous did. With the 03 Clone Wars to Revenge of the Sith, but that's a little different. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm wrong-headed in saying it's different. Unfortunately for me, Saw Gerrera is a bit of a mixed bag. As Nick mentioned, he debuted in the Clone Wars. He then proceeded to be in Star Wars Rebels and Fallen Order and The Bad Batch. And three of those were after Rogue One. But there's just something about Whitaker's performance in this movie that just, it baffles me. It just seems like he's in a different movie than everyone else. His acting. And like, I like Saw Gerrera. He's really cool. And Forrest Whitaker returned to play the character in Rebels and Fallen Order. Much better performance there. It's just his performance here was just really weird to me. It's just odd. Yeah. Although the Spooky Squad on the Gmod Squad, go subscribe, has the running joke of lies, deception, which is his first lines in the film. Let's see it. That's one of the running jokes that we have over there. It's a good time. Go check it out. And that is our characters for Rogue One.
Man.
We're cruising through this. We're only 18 minutes in.
Wow.
I don't know if we're going at lightning speed or what's happening here, but we're moving. This might be the shortest one yet. So let's talk about the effects and cinematography. The effects in this film, I would say, are about 95% gorgeous. The scenery, the special effects, the space sequences. This is a nice looking film with my favorite planet in all of Star Wars, Scarif. But more on that later. But let's address the elephant in the room for visual effects. Let's talk about Tarkin and let's talk about Leia.
Leia was pretty good.
You want to start?
I really enjoyed the effects and everything in this, I really enjoy Star Wars because a lot of things are more practical effects than they are CGI,
Especially on Jedha in this film, you can tell.
Exactly. It makes things a lot more nicer looking, I thought. And it feels more
real.
Real. Yeah. Because now it's just a CGI fight of who can make it look better. Now everyone's just like, they don't look right flying. But here you watch Star Wars. And you're like, Star Wars! I love the cinematography and all that. When you see that...
Oh, we're not ready for cinematography just yet.
What? That's just effects. All right. Well,
yeah, we got to talk about Tarkin and Leia. Because a lot of people are divided on this.
I think they're good.
So I thought I would be alone on my hill here. this is controversial, but I'm going to defend Tarkin, specifically him. Because by today's standards, and even then, sure, that is the uncanny valley territory. But this film was made when deepfakes were just getting started.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing like what was capable of today. I truly believe that Tarkin's appearance in this film was a cinematic achievement. That was special. Some will disagree. Some will fight me tooth and nail over this opinion, but I will defend it. Leia, on the other hand, looked too much like cartoony for me. Like, the face wasn't quite lined up with her head, in my opinion. But it still wasn't bad. You could tell it was Leia. But I will defend Tarkin. I will die on that hill.
I really like both of them. I think both of them look pretty great for what they're trying to do. Like, Tarkin's in it a lot more, and it was an important character to put into the movie because he is this important character.
Very important.
And so they had to, and they found a way to do it where it worked. And I know a lot of people when it first came out were even like, dang, like this is pretty good. They're having this person who's died in real life in this movie as an actual character.
Like, I think a lot of people forget that when this movie came out, the Tarkin sequences were praised.
Yeah.
And now they are, like, one of the most hated things about the film. And it's like, yes, technology advanced, but think about the technology at the time. Why are you holding that against it?
And
oh, go ahead.
I won't crap on the Leia one, because I think it looks pretty good for what they're doing. And also because that same weekend the movie came out, she died.
I know. What a timing.
I'm like, man. But they used her daughter, so it's not going to be perfect because they're trying to overlay the thing together, and that's how it just turned out.
What would be interesting, you know how George Lucas did the remasters of the original trilogy? Be interesting if Lucasfilm decided to remaster Rogue One, just the Tarkin Leia scenes with today's deepfake technology. Just, like, touch it up every once in a while, then, like, you go on to these posts like, whoa, that's really cool. Now you can go to the cinematography. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, I love cinematography of Star Wars,
especially this film.
The sequels I will trash on a lot. The cinematography is still amazing, and this movie has some of my favorite shots in all the Star Wars movies. That scene of the Death Star shooting Jedi.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
My goodness, with him talking as he's doing it. And just the lighting of it light up and then bang. Just amazing. That's like a background on your computer. Like, dang.
Also, at Scarif when it arrives, poking over the horizon, there's so many great shots. It's well executed.
Oh, yeah.
You feel the gritty nature of this movie, because this is more of a war movie than Star Wars has ever been.
Oh, yeah.
And you feel that gritty nature, but I also love the contrasts. You go from the sterility and, like, uncomfortable cleanliness of the Imperial facilities to, like, the griminess of the rebels hiding in the forest. I love it. It is a beautiful contrast. And as I mentioned, Scarif, the beach planet. Gorgeous planet. My favorite Star Wars simply because of how it looks. It's just like, man, that is incredible. That's great. The cinematography. All the shots that show, like, when Baze and Chirrut are on the beach and the AT-ACT walks up. And, like, coming through the smoke. And it's like, chills. And then that scene at the end that we can't talk about with the red lighting. We'll get more into that later. It's gorgeous. So the writing and score. The writing is solid.
Yeah.
As far as the dramatic aspects of it goes, it works. But there's nothing too standoutish about it. The humor, on the other hand, is top-notch. The humor is incredible. It feels like the original trilogy with the heart and the laughs that is pumped into this film.
But it ties you down well to the dark side of it, and I like that.
Yeah, the best part of the script is something we can't talk about yet, so stay tuned for heavy spoilers where we talk about where the script really shines. Anything you want to add about that part before we go to score?
No, I think pretty much did well with that.
So the score is, unfortunately, it's in a really unique place. because they didn't want to use the classic Star Wars themes, because they wanted people to know just from experiencing the film that this is different than the episodic adventures.
Mm-hmm.
So it strays away from a lot of those classics, or with a few exceptions. And while not as good as what John Williams did, I will be probably one of the few people who will defend the theme. The Rogue One theme is a soaring and memorable theme, and it plays multiple times through the film at these tremendous moments where you get this, like, your heart swells with it. I like the score a lot, actually.
Star Wars movies, even Rogue One, and most of them, their score, I love it. It's a Star
They
Wars
take
movie.
time.
That score is important.
Mm-hmm. I think Star Wars might be the movie where score matters the most from what I've seen.
Oh, yeah.
Either Star Wars or Jurassic Park or Jaws, which are also John Williams, coincidentally, for the score. Ready to move on then?
Yep.
Alright. Warning, warning, heavy spoilers ahead.
Even though you already spoiled the beginning.
Well, I never said it happened. I said that was before I saw it what I told people.
Mm-hmm.
Did it happen how I predicted? Let's find out. Chunk number 1. Research scientist Jyn Erso and his family are in hiding. We're off to a good start. Are in hiding on the planet Lamu when Imperial weapons developer Orson Crick arrives to press him into completing the Death Star, a space station-based superweapon capable of destroying entire planets. Galen's wife, Lyra, is killed in the confrontation while their daughter Jyn escapes and is rescued by rebel extremist Saw Gerrera. Chunk number 1.
What an opening.
How do you open a Star Wars film like that? Holy cow.
And this was the first time in a Star Wars movie where they didn't have those opening credit screen.
And so they play into that with the score just like jump scaring you. It goes, but I loved that. Because they wanted people to know that this is different than the episodic ones. I think with that little jump scare, it pulls you right into the story.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the central performances of this scene of Mads Mikkelsen and Ben Mendelsohn, which are both, as we've talked about, great performances that just address the scene. But the visual, we talked cinematography a lot, when Krennic and the Death Troopers are walking over the farmland and Galen's just standing there alone. Amazing. Wow.
I'm like watching the trailer for Rogue One. That was one of the main focuses of it, is him walking with the Death Troopers. And most of the like magazines and everything for this when it was coming out was that scene of them walking with the Death Troopers, and it was such an interesting thing to open with it. And I was like, this really pulls you in because this is a scene that everyone had been talking about from the trailer right at the beginning. And I'll throw you straight into this.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next chunk, let's talk briefly about the Death Troopers. These are pure black stormtroopers with bright green eyes in their visor that carry mean-looking rifles. But the interesting thing about the Death Troopers is, canonically, you had to be at least 6'6" to be trained to be a Death Trooper. So all of these beings are intimidatingly tall, making Ben Mendelsohn, who's probably like 5'10" or so, and Galen, who's probably about 6 foot, seem very small as these Death Troopers approach. It's incredible. I love their look. So chunk 2. 15 years later, cargo pilot Bodhi Rook defects from the Empire, taking a holographic message recorded by Galen to Saw Gerrera on the desert moon, Jeddah. Rebel Alliance intelligence officer Cassian Andor learns of Rook's defection and the Death Star from an informant. Jyn is freed from an Imperial labor camp at Wobani, and is brought to the rebel leader Mon Mothma, who convinces her to find and rescue Galen so the Alliance can learn more about the Death Star. Cassian is covertly ordered by General Draven to kill Jyn Erso, rather than extract him. Chunk 2 introduces us to K2SO, so it's amazing.
Yeah. Man, he's only 5'9".
And Ben Mendelsohn?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's short. But yeah, this chunk, this is what establishes the depth of Cassian Andor. Mentions the informant. What happens there is he's getting his information from the informant, then stormtroopers interrupt and he kills them. The informant has an injured arm and can't climb out of here like Cassian does, So to cover his tracks, he kills the informant. And then the look of disgust, of like remorse of what he did right before he runs. It really sets up Cassian. If you're not paying attention, you won't notice the look of
I noticed
horror
it when
in
I
his
saw it. I was
eyes.
like,
It's one of the things that makes Cassian so interesting is he's coming from such a dark place, doing anything. It's crazy. And then K2SO. Congratulations, you are being rescued. Please do not resist.
That was an interesting opening with Jyn Erso, because you're not really sure what's going on too much, and then she escapes it. And they don't touch on it too much while she was there or anything. But I thought it was an interesting place to start off, how she has no idea that she's trying to be rescued at that moment, so she just beats them all with a shovel.
Yep. And then K2 just grab and slams her on the ground. I love it.
You're being saved.
We could probably quote almost all of K2's lines. That's how quotable K2SO is. He's incredible.
Or Krennic, where he's like, farmer with a man of your talents?
Man of your talents? Oh, look, it's Lyra, back from the dead. It's a miracle. Alright, chunk 3. Jyn, Cassian, and K2SO travel to Jeddah, where the Empire is removing kyber crystals from the Holy City to power the Death Star. Guerrera and his partisans are engaged in an armed insurgency against them. With the aid of blind, force-sensitive warrior Chirrut Imwe and his mercenary friend Baze Malbus, Jyn makes contact with Guerrera, who has been holding Rook captive. Guerrera shows her the message, in which Galen reveals he has secretly built a vulnerability into the Death Star, and directs them to retrieve the schematics from an Imperial databank on the planet Scarif. So this chunk covers most of Jeddah. And man, what a sequence.
I like that opening part before they go to Jeddah where they're in the Rebel base. And it gives you such a different vibe right off the beginning of how the Rebels are. Because when you focus on them in the original trilogy, it's like you focus on Luke Skywalker, you focus on Leia Organa, you focus on Han Solo. Those are like the main people. You're not focused on the side characters or the people that are actually running the Rebel Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see them have such a darker tone in this movie than what you would usually expect. And I thought it played interesting into it.
It's the leaders of the Alliance see what they're up against better than the people of the Alliance. Yeah. So like Mon Mothma, General Draven, Jen Dodonna, and even Bail Organa, who returns for Revenge of the Sith, they have these like very serious tones about them for what they're up against. And it's very interesting. The Jeddah sequence has the friendship developed between Jyn and Cassian, and Baze and Chirrut are brought into it, and they meet Bodhi. This whole sequence was incredible to me, Jeddah. Oh, yeah. I love it. The visuals, the lines. Are you kidding me? I am blind. The action as well, like this sequence.
I really thought it was interesting because I wasn't too aware of that they used kyber crystals to run the Death Star until this movie. And I thought, man, that's an interesting touch because, you know, kyber crystals aren't like this mainstream thing that a lot of people know, but people that are more into Star Wars would know that's how you power a lightsaber. So to know that the Death Star's running on all of these kyber crystals is like,
no,
maybe that's why they started hunting down Jedi too as well.
To be clear, I'm not sure if Disney made that change or if that was in the original. I don't know too much about the expanded original canon, so I'm not sure if that's always been the case, but as far as our current universe is concerned, that is what it is. It's those kyber crystals. I'm sure if somebody watches this who's a Legends only fan, if it wasn't that way, sorry, I didn't know. As far as I'm concerned, the Death Star runs on kyber crystals. Or at least the weapon itself.
Yeah.
Okay. On the Death Star, Director Krennic orders a low-powered test shot, which destroys Jeddah's capital. Jyn and her group take Rook and flee the moon, but Guerrera remains to die with the city. Grand Moff Tarkin congratulates Krennic before using Rook's defection and the security leak that represents as a pretext to take control of the project. Rook leads the group to Galen's Imperial Research Facility on the planet Edu, where Cassian chooses not to kill Galen, against orders. Jyn makes her presence known moments before rebel bombers attack the facility. Galen is mortally wounded by the bombers and dies in Jyn's arms, before she escapes with her group on board a stolen Imperial cargo shuttle. Krennic is summoned by Darth Vader, yes him, to answer for the Death Star's attack on Jedha. Krennic seeks his support for an audience with the Emperor, but Vader instead force chokes him and orders him to ensure no further breaches occur. Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, Director. Bam, 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 ba-dum.
What a time.
Yeah, this is a big chunk. We got to break this down a bit more in depth here. So Guerrero's dying words, save the rebellion, save the dream, that went on to be a rallying cry throughout all related Star Wars lore afterwards, including Rebels and comics and books that deal with this time period. That became such a thing. Save the rebellion, save the dream. And then we talked a lot about Tarkin, his involvement in the film. But let's talk more about what happens on Edu.
That was an interesting sequence on Edu.
So just to preface this clearly, General Draven orders Cassian to kill Galen. Their ship crashes on Edu, so they lose contact with the Alliance. Draven, thinking Cassian's dead, orders the X-Wings to go and bomb the facility, not knowing that Cassian and co. are headed to the platform where the bombers are going to go off. And then Galen has that moment with Krennic when he arrives on the scene. Like, that little sum up doesn't mention that Krennic went to Edu as well to interrogate Galen about the problem. Like, there's a lot to unpack here.
The only thing I will complain about this scene, and I know it's for plot purposes, but that ship had plot armor. I swear.
Krennic's shuttle?
Yeah. In one of the shots, you see, like, one of the shots off the X-Wing go right in between the wings of the ship, and I'm sitting there like, blow up the ship! Do it!
I would agree, except for the fact that in related games, I've seen what Krennic's shuttle's capable of, and I'm not surprised it survived the Alliance bombs, even if it did get directly hit.
I was like, come on, I just tried blowing
up. That's a fair complaint. Like, honestly, it is. I do like how there's this moment when they finally fix comms and communicate with Draven that there's Imperial or Rebel units on site. He tries to call off the attack, but it was too late. So it's like, yes, the Rebels are being forced to severity, but they're still the good guys in this conflict. And it's a hard line to walk, but Rogue One does it very well.
It shows that just because you're good doesn't mean you can always fix everything. Because that's what the original trilogy definitely was there's a lot of, it's the good guys, it's gonna happen.
They'll figure it out.
And it wasn't until Revenge of the Sith where Star Wars really dived into the, you can't stop it even if you are good. Because it's bound to happen. Not everything goes as planned.
Yeah. That's what Rogue One does very, very well, as we'll keep getting into here. The further down this rabbit hole we go, the further down it goes. And then, of course, Vader's scene here with Krennic is awesome.
I love that scene where you just see the water drain from
the back to tank,
see him there, and you're like, bruh.
You get a brief glimpse of him without the armor, and it's like, ooh. I like it a lot. Alright. Our next chunk here is by far the biggest. This will deal with Scarif, as well as a bit on Yavin 4, so here we go. Jyn proposes Jyn proposes a plan to steal the Death Star schematics using the Rebel fleet, but fails to gain approval from the Alliance Council. Council, who feel victory against the Empire is now impossible. Frustrated at their inaction, Jyn's group lead a small squad of rebel volunteers to raid the databank on Scarif. I'm actually going to break this chunk up a little bit to just talk about this sequence on Yavin 4. Really well done, showing how differing perspectives, with Radis and Mon Mothma and the others, it's very interesting. But I love when Jyn storms out of the meeting after her speech, which is a really good speech, mind. But she storms out like Chirrut, Bodhi, and Baze are like leaning on cargo crates, waiting for her to return. And she goes on, and or I guess Bodhi was with her and comes out with it. But the point is, she's like, well, they're not going to do anything to help us. And then I think Chirrut says that we have to try or something, and then I don't think 3 of us is enough, and then Baze, how many do we need? And looks at me just like gestures over, and there's Cassian, K2, and a bunch of rebel soldiers ready to... And that's where Cassian's character arc kind of goes full circle, is his admitting to himself and everyone, we've all done things we'd rather not think about for the Rebel Alliance. Things that we believed in. We got a chance to make it right. And it's such a powerful scene. I do love it a lot.
I like how they, because again, I've said it 100 times already, the rebels are showing their darker side here, and it's not just Cassian, it's a lot of them. Because the rebels, most of the original trilogy even, are losing.
Yeah.
And if you really pay attention, half the time they're just running away.
I mean, like, all of Empire Strikes Back is them on the run.
Exactly.
Like, they ran to Hoth and then got found and had to run
really fast.
What I really like, what one thing Star Wars does exceptionally well is the background characters having interesting designs, and some of them even being filled in with interesting stories, like Plo Koon, for example, is a paramount one. The lizard-looking rebel soldier there, who's named Pal, they say his name a bit in the next scene. I just love his design. He just looks really cool, and he's a pretty major part of the final conflict that we're about to talk about. It's interesting. Yeah. Star Wars does that very well with their background people. So here we go. Arriving at Scarif on the stolen Imperial shuttle, which Rook dubs Rogue One. Roll credits. A disguised Jyn and Cassian enter the base with K2SO, while the other rebels attack the Imperial garrison as a diversion. Make 10 men feel like 100. Loved that line. And then Jyn's speech here. Saw Gerrera used to say, a man with a sharp stick and nothing left to lose can take the day. They have no idea we're coming. They have no reason to expect us. So we're going to hit that beach and we're going to take a chance. And then Cassian, K2, and I, we're going to get into the facility and we're going to find a way to get the plans. And then we'll take the next chance and the next one until we win, or all the chances are spent. I loved that speech. It was great. So, we get back into it here. The Alliance learns of the raid from an intercepted Imperial communication and deploys their fleet in support, which Admiral Radis had already left to go and assist them because he was... I get the feeling based on the dialogue that he was just going to go himself, just like, you know what? I'm doing it myself, and then Rogue One's already there. I'm like, yes.
Never mind.
Admiral Radis was pretty fun. Another background character that is really cool. So, our first Rogue One member dies as they are going to retrieve the data file for the plans of the Death Star. K2SO sacrifices himself to hold off literally 24 troopers, and he took out almost all of them before he fell. And just watching him getting blown apart, and as his voice starts wavering with the climb, it's the only way to reach the plans. If you can close the shield gate, you can transmit them to the Alliance. Goodbye. And breaks the console to seal it. Oh, man.
You know how upset my dad was when he died?
I can imagine. It's so hard to watch him go down.
And even when he's like getting shot and everything, you notice in the voice that it's starting to crackle and fizzle out.
His voice is just dying down. I hate it. but it's beautiful, but I hate it.
Yeah.
Um, so as the rebels outside, they've got this plan. They've got the data. The Jyn and Cassian retrieve the actual thing. But because the shield gate had been closed, they were trapped on the surface. So they have to transmit it out of here. The only way to do that is to open the shield gate again. So they have this plan unfolding what they have to do. They have to... Bodhi has to tie in the Imperial vessel to a comms tower, and the forward unit with Baze and Chirrut has to, and Pow for that matter, I know I mentioned before, it's just like he was there too, has to throw a master switch to tie it into the main tower, which Cassian and Jyn then have to upload into the tower to transmit to the fleet. While this all has to happen, and they have to warn the Alliance they have to close the shield gate. That's the first step in all of this. On their way to the Master Switch, they are overwhelmed by Krennic's Death Trooper squads. Did I mention Krennic's on the planet? Because Krennic's on the planet too. I don't think I mentioned it.
No.
Krennic's on the planet trying to get the ships while... trying to figure out what Galen sabotage was while all this was happening. So, with the Death Troopers pinning them down, and the only named rebels we had, other than the main cast, which was Melfi, Pow, Tonk, Cephala, they're all dead at this point. You watch them get gunned down, and even though you just knew their names in passing, you feel like as they drop one by one. It's like, oh no. So then Chirrut, the blind, Force-sensitive warrior, he walks out, the Force protecting him from all the blaster fire, and he throws the Master Switch, completing his purpose, and is killed by a grenade. With the communication ready to go, Bodhi sends the signal up and talks to Admiral Raddus. This culminates in a shore trooper attacking the shuttle, throwing a grenade into the ship, and Bodhi, finally becoming the hero that Galen inspired him to be, dies in the ensuing explosion. Baze Malbus, infuriated at the death of his longtime friend, regains his faith in the Force through Chirrut's dying words, and with an amazing, "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me," guns down and kills all of the Death Troopers, the final Death Trooper holding a live grenade. Baze got shot a lot in this scene, so he's probably going to die anyway. But he gets to look one last time at Chirrut, knowing he will see him again in the Force as the bomb takes out Baze Malbus as well. To be clear, Baze Malbus took an incredible amount of punishment for a human.
Yeah.
K2SO got hit like 20 times before he fell. Baze got shot 7 times, and he is a human with just a chest plate, and not everything's hitting the chest. Until a bomb took him out. Like, Baze went down like
He's a walking tank.
Admiral Raddus of the Rebel Alliance, learning that he must deactivate the shields, notices that the ion bombs from Y-Wings had disabled one of the Star Destroyers. In case you haven't noticed, we're huge Star Wars fans, so if we're getting way too technical for you to understand, I'm sorry, but I'm not changing it. Realize that one of the Star Destroyers disabled, he says, "Call up a Hammerhead Corvette, I've got an idea." And the crew of the Hammerhead Corvette sacrifices itself to push one Star Destroyer into the one still attacking, shearing... There's no way they could have got clear from the resulting explosion.
Could have thrown it in reverse.
Maybe they got clear, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
But shearing the top off the second Star Destroyer and both plummeting into the shield gate. The slow-mo, the visuals, the soundscape, incredible as the shield gate goes boom, allowing them to transmit the plans. Meanwhile, Jyn and Cassian, attempting to climb the archive tower to get to the antenna, are engaged by Krennic and 2 Death Troopers. Cassian tries to buy Jyn time and does take out the final 2 Death Troopers, but Krennic hits Cassian and he falls to his demise. So, as Jyn makes it to the top of the tower, she is finally able to try to transmit the plans, which needs to realign the antenna, get a cool showdown with a TIE fighter where she managed to realign the antenna. As she goes to plug it in, Krennic emerges, holding her at blaster point. As she goes on a rant on how the rebellion dies today, she loses nothing but time. He gets shot in the shoulder and drops. And Cassian, leaning on the pillar, because he's not dead yet, is there, and he's standing over Krennic. He stops Jyn from trying to get petty revenge on Krennic as she uploads the plans and transmits them to the Raddus. Or to Admiral Raddus.
Mhm.
Just the reason why that slip up happened, let me explain myself here. This is how much I love Star Wars. The Raddus is the name of a Resistance capital ship as seen in The Last Jedi, named after this character in honor of his service. That's why I messed that up. But to Raddus himself. As they receive the plans and are beginning to consider how they're going to get Rogue One out of there, the Death Star appears over the horizon line, with Tarkin in command to target the tower at Scarif to hopefully destroy the plans, and Krennic, as Tarkin's rival, Tarkin knows he's there. Krennic looks up one last time to see his own creation literally blow up in his face. They didn't even hit the base tower. They shot the top off just to specifically hit Krennic.
That was such a funny thing. I'm like, man didn't even get to see the explosion go off. He's blown apart before it even hit the planet.
It's like, there's no way Tarkin could have known he was up there, but he hit him direct. It was a bullseye. It felt like
this big FU to him.
It was a bullseye. Jyn and Cassian make it down to the beach as the impact of the Death Star shot is going to go and just wipe out this part of the planet. It's the Death Star. Yeah. You see Jyn and Cassian are essentially the last two standing, the Imperials and Rebels having essentially wiped each other out. They embrace one final time as Cassian tells her that her father would have been proud, and the explosion kills all remaining life at the Imperial depot on Scarif. It also ruins all chance for Scarif to appear again. Tragedy.
I know.
And there's that chunk. What a chunk!
What?
I don't know if there's more we have to say because we kind of stopped a lot through it to say it, but if there is, go for it.
I have nothing more. We just kind of touched on as we would.
I think I like that more. I think we should do that more in the futures as we're going through the chunk, talk about it instead of afterwards. Because, oh man.
Such
Rogue One's climax.
Last chunk.
And that's what we couldn't talk about before is the script. The best part of the script is how it handles the death scenes. It's a modern blockbuster, but everyone you love gets wiped out. You don't see that anymore.
No.
But it's handled so beautifully with the score and the dialogue. Oh, it's incredible. The acting. Man, I love this movie.
A great time.
I love this movie. I'm sad to see them go, don't get me wrong, but I love this movie.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there is one character we are pretty much guaranteed to never see again, and that's Jyn. Mm-hmm. Because unless they do something more with Saw Gerrera and the Bad Batch.
Yeah. Because
she's with Saw, and then she's in prison, and then you see everything else she does with her life. And Jyn is a good character, but unfortunately that's just the case.
Yeah.
Krennic, I thought he was going to appear in Rebels because he was name dropped, but he never did show up, so I don't think we'll see Krennic again. But we are going to see Cassian again. I hope we see K2 again, and if the show does well, maybe they'll greenlight a Baze and Church show. I'd be all in for that. Our final little chunk here. So let's do this, talk about it as it happens. Admiral Raddus bids "May the Force be with you" to Rogue One, with legitimate sadness in his eyes. I love how they did that. It must have been a little effect touch-up, but it was brilliant. Yeah. As the Rebel fleet prepares to jump to hyperspace, the Devastator appears. Vader's personal Star Destroyer, the Devastator.
You know what I love about this scene? And I was talking to my dad about it, because we're sitting there, and it just appears, and we both focusing on that one ship that just ramps straight into
poor Corvette.
And I was like, imagine being like, yeah, we did it!
It's like the Corvette tries to turn at the last second.
Oh, we got this!
But that's how big of a Star Wars fan we are. I said the Devastator, and we knew what we were talking about as Vader's personal Star Destroyer. So Vader prepares a boarding party to go and get the plans from Raddus's ship. Interestingly enough, actually I'll talk about that later, the Rebels download the files onto a small disk that you may recognize if you've ever seen the first Star Wars film or know anything about Star Wars at all, because it's that disk onto a small data disk, and as they go to run into an evacuation shuttle, the door closes, the power is cut as the tractor beam grabs Raddus's vessel, and a red glow emanates down the hallway. All you hear is his lightsaber ignites, and Star Wars goes horror movie.
Oh my goodness sakes. This scene is like everyone as a Star Wars fan's favorite scene.
It was
It's
incredible to see Vader again, and the first time seeing him since on the big screen since Revenge of the Sith, where it's just a passing final scenes, and if you hadn't watched Rebels, you hadn't seen him since. And he owns the screen here. There's like, what, probably 12 or so rebel troops there?
Yep.
And he just obliterates them effortlessly. It shows... It's a cool contrast, because pretty much every Star Wars film is about the lightsaber users and the Force and all of that. So then we get a movie without lightsabers, until Vader shows up at the end. And it contrasts to the average people that we just got used to seeing how terrifying facing a Force user must be. When they know they're in trouble. You see the fear in their eyes, and they all fire everything they have, and it doesn't matter. He owns them all.
Effortlessly just like raises one to the ceiling, swipes it as he's blocking a shot at the same time, and just mowing them down like it's a little piece of grass.
It's crazy.
Can't wait for the Obi-Wan show, because they said that he's supposed to be in it, so I'm like, please make an epic scene.
They managed to pass the plans through the slight gap in the door as Vader kills the rest, and they managed to eject the Tantive 4. If you don't know what that is, Leia's ship from the very opening of A New Hope. And as the ship goes, the plans are passed off to Captain Antilles, who is the first person Vader ever chokes in Star Wars chronologically, not canonically, when he holds him up. He's the yellow jacket rebel trooper in A New Hope, and passes the plans to Leia. And apparently Captain Antilles missed several thousand briefings. He's like, what did they give us? And then she's like, Leia doesn't go on. She says hope. But it's like, Antilles has no idea what's going on. And then the credits roll. The I love it.
What a movie.
Now, what I was going to say, interestingly enough, Admiral Raddus survives Vader being on his ship. He gets taken prisoner by the Imperials, and I don't remember what happens to him after that. I don't remember. But I do know I read that he survived that, because Vader leaves Raddus' ship immediately to chase the Tantive 4 for the start of A New Hope to occur. But I love the different spin it puts on A New Hope, because in A New Hope, you have Vader just convinced that Leia is part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor when she's a princess. Rogue One explains exactly why Vader's convinced, because he chased this specific ship here, and you are here. You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take her away. I love it. What a movie.
This movie was great. Because it's the first time it hadn't been like part of like the prequels, the original.
It was a Star Wars story.
Started out too.
Yeah, it was a Star Wars story.
Yeah, and it just opened up so many more doors they could have done.
And
they just haven't. And I'm like, come on.
So let's go to our favorite and least favorite scene. Would you like to start? Start with your favorite.
Favorite scene? Darth Vader.
Yeah, I had a feeling it would be. It is not mine. My favorite scene is the Imperial confrontation on Jeddah. It introduces and unites the main cast, like Chirrut, Baze, K2, Jyn. There's incredible action, incredible humor. Don't get me wrong, the Vader scene's incredible. It really is. I just love that Jeddah sequence with the ATST and the hover tank and Saw's partisans developing into... Oh, I love that scene. Least favorite scene.
I think my least favorite scene would be the part when the pilot gets taken in by Saw Gerrera. And it felt so off to me, that whole sequence of just get the being that can read minds to suck on his face and all of this.
Booglet.
Like,
although it sounds like he says boogly. Because his acting
so
performance is baffling. Yeah, I agree. Saw's interrogation, because it was also pointless. Because we don't get to see what Bodhi said.
No.
So I agree. My least favorite scene is Saw's interrogation of Bodhi. Like I said, no problem against Saw. No problem against Forrest Whitaker either. He returned to voice the character very well. It's just his acting decisions in this film are just baffling to me.
Yeah.
All right, it's time. I'm interested to see where you put it. What is your overall rating for Rogue One: A Star Wars Story?
Give it a 95.
We are very close. I give it a 94. I truly love this film. It is great. I put it just below Dune, 1% below Dune, and below No Way Home. But otherwise, that's the third highest rating I've given any film thus far.
I don't remember what I gave others.
I know, and I don't write down what yours is, so I just know mine.
Mhm.
I love this movie.
Oh yeah.
I don't really have any major complaints about it other than Forrest
Mhm.
Whitaker's strange performance.
Yep.
Honestly, if Forrest Whitaker just be more like Forrest Whitaker, 'cause he's an Oscar-winning actor.
Yeah.
If he just goes more like Forrest Whitaker, this movie would probably be even higher. Because
Yep.
it's just every time he starts talking, it's hard not to laugh.
Yeah.
And like he tries to give some emotional depth to it, but it just doesn't work sometimes.
No.
Next up, actually this time, is our Jurassic period, part 1, Jurassic Park. Ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-ba-ba. Love that movie too. That one's going to be a contender for the highest rated movie I've reviewed, I'm almost positive. But we'll see. It's been a bit since I've seen it. We'll see how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So that is going to do it for the Great Movie Rad podcast. I've been Gaston.
I've been Jerryofdom.
May the force be with you, and we will see you in the movies. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.